The chief operating officer of Brookfield was brought into committee today to speak on Mark Carney's conflicts of interest.
At Brookfield, when Brookfield's value increases, the value of stock options and deferred share units also increase. That's how these instruments work, correct?
Yes, when our share price increases, the value of those instruments do increase, yes.
And that basic reality doesn't change simply because those instruments would be placed in a blind trust. The value would still rise when the value of Brookfield rises, correct?
Yes.
So if someone holds Brookfield options and units in a blind trust or not, they personally benefit when Brookfield performs well. Isn't that right?
Anybody who holds those instruments, whether during employment or following employment, derives the benefit from those instruments. That's correct.
And any instrument can be sold, bought back, cash settled, or unwound in an instance where, for example, if Parliament required by law divestment by sale, that possibility exists, correct?
The Prime Minister would have certain instruments as part of our long-term incentive plans. There are certain instruments that are less liquid than others. I'm happy to get into the details of that if you wish.
I would, but the premise is what I need to settle is that they can be sold, bought back, or cash settled or unwound. It is possible, should it be a requirement. Is that correct?
Yes, it's possible.
Thank you. Long dated, they're long dated, so we get that. But that's generally how compensation contracts work. That's not some kind of unique, that's not something unique to Mr. Carney, since you brought him up.
Well, long-term, yes. In some cases, exercisable in shorter horizons. In some cases, the ultimate value is received far into the future.
Can you explain briefly how stock options or deferred share units and notional long-term incentive plans work at Brookfield? What drives their value?
Yes, I'd be happy to, and I will try to be brief. Helpfully, all disclosure relating to Brookfield stock options and deferred share units is disclosed in detail in our public filings, so it's very much available. In a nutshell, stock options are rights to acquire shares of Brookfield at a certain price, and those exist and during their pendency are exercisable, subject to vesting, because when we award them, people take subject to vesting schedules. So even though you awarded them, they have to vest during the time that you are with Brookfield, and then exercisable for stock that can then be sold into the market. Deferred share units are slightly different. They also track the value of a Brookfield share, but they are not actually shares. And when they mature, they are paid out to the individual based on the value of the share at that time. They are the second component to some of our LTIP programs.
Are you able to give us approximate value range of options and deferred share units that Mr. Carney still holds?
As I said in my response letter, that's personal and private information, and that's not something that Brookfield is permitted to disclose to the committee.
Well, what I will say is that you enjoy parliamentary privilege while you're at this table, and this committee is not constrained in its ability to request information or documents. But I'll move on for the moment.
Okay.
Increases in Brookfield's performance increases the value of the instruments that Mark Carney still holds. So he makes more when Brookfield does better. Yes?
In relation to the stock options and deferred share units, yes, as the value of Brookfield increases, the value of those instruments increase. There are also carried interest entitlements that relate more specifically to funds that we manage.
So speaking of funds, the Global Transition Fund is one that Mr. Carney was directly involved in. Are you able to provide us with details of the investments that are inside it that drive the value of his position or those who hold a position in it?
Yes, so I believe you're referring to Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1, which was launched during the time that the Prime Minister was with Brookfield. And I can confirm that all of the investments made in that fund are contained in the annexure to the Commissioner's screen document that has been published.
We're going to have to come back to some of this, but my last question is, with the Prime Minister still holding compensation that rises with Brookfield's performance, how would you say that Canadians would be able to have confidence that blind trust and private screen are enough to protect the public interest when, as you agreed, when Brookfield does better, the Prime Minister is going to do better?
And that's a very fair question.
I need a quick response, and if you can you?
Well, I think it's based on whether or not the conflicts can be managed. I'm happy to talk about that further.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Bieber. I want to ask you some questions about carried interest payments that you alluded to earlier. Mr. Carney's ethics disclosure indicates that he is entitled to carried interest payments, which are essentially future bonus pay from the Brookfield Transition Fund 1, which he helped set up. Mr. Carney also co-chaired the Brookfield Transition Fund 2 as well as the Catalytic Transition Fund. Is Mr. Carney entitled to carried interest payments in respect of those funds?
No, he's not. And the reason for that is we were in the process of setting up those funds when Mr. Carney decided to leave Brookfield to pursue the Liberal leadership. And we had not yet instituted any allocation of carry from those funds. Those funds had not yet been raised. When we talk about launching a fund, we're starting the marketing of that fund, and they had not yet reached a conclusion, even an initial closing of those funds, and therefore we hadn't allocated any carry. Had he stayed with Brookfield, he certainly would have been entitled to some.
Thank you for that. And of course, he is entitled to carried interest payments in respect of the first fund, Brookfield Transition Fund 1. I just want to confirm that that fund is registered in Bermuda.
Registered in Bermuda? Yes, I believe that one is.
And the Brookfield Transition Fund 2 is also registered in Bermuda?
I don't have that information at hand.
Well, I would note a March 26, 2025 CBC News report that indicates that the Ontario Business Registry indicates that the governing jurisdiction for the Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1 and the Brookfield Global Transition Fund 2 is Bermuda. I presume you're not disputing that.
I won't dispute that.
And And I would also just ask that the Catalytic Transition Fund you'll confirm is registered in the Cayman Islands.
I can take that away and make sure that I'm not misspeaking on which jurisdiction it's part of.
I think you know the answer to that. It's yes. So I want to ask you a little bit about the schedule of payments with respect to carried interest from the Brookfield Transition Fund 1. When does the fund mature?
Transition Fund 1 would have a maturity of 10 years plus a 2-year possible extension, which would take it to 2032 to 34, I believe. 2032
or 2034. So it would be at that time that the carried interest payments would be paid out.
Towards that. And I would say that regardless of where the fund is actually established, everything that I mentioned in relation to Madame Lapointe's question hold for everything in that fund.
Now, just in terms of what is in that fund,
yes.
There are new investments in that fund, correct?
There are investments in that fund. They're not necessarily new.
But if there were new investments in that fund, that would increase the value of carried interest payments, would that potentially?
If additional capital were invested in that fund, it could, if they're good investments.
Okay. Now, Brookfield CEO Bruce Flatt was quoted in a National Post article dated March 15th, 2025, in which he described carried interest payments in the following way, quote, "Put simply, carried interest is our share of the profits realized on an entire fund subject to that fund exceeding a minimum target return for clients. If we meet fund expectations, we get 20% of the profits," close quote. So you would agree that that's an accurate characterization of how carried interest in respect of the fund works?
I think that's a fair summary. Subject to that, the subject to is a very significant part of how carried interest works.
Right. So Brookfield ideally would get 20% of the profits if the threshold had been met or exceeded. Now, in terms of carried interest payments to the managing partners, what is the range? What is the percent of that 20%?
Well, it completely ranges by fund. And
And
because
I'm asking with respect to the Brookfield Transition Fund 1.
Need a quick response, Mr. Bieber, please.
it's a proportion of the total that Brookfield is
I'm
entitled
asking
to.
what is that portion?
Okay. May have to come back to that, Mr. Cooper.
It was great to see Michael Cooper push him over the Bermuda locations. If the Carney Liberal government continues for its full term, it will be interesting to see where the Brookfield stock ends up. A lot of people believe that a spring-summer election is coming, so I guess only time will tell. Anyway, I'd like to know what you think down in the comments section below, and have a good one.